What's up, everyone? My name is Jack Binder, and for my paper, I chose to write about gun violence in America. When looking over topics to choose from, I thought to myself, why not talk about one of the biggest issues that we're currently facing in America and one of the biggest threats to public health that we've ever seen? I'm talking about gun violence in America. It does not need to be said to know that gun violence is happening at an alarming rate in our country, and it's happening almost anywhere you go. Of course, this is a difficult issue to find a solution for, mainly because of opposing political views and different ideals. I believe that the issue of gun violence should not be looked at in the way of politics and instead talked about as a major public health crisis that needs to be acted upon immediately. Our country is dealing with gun violence deaths every single day, and more often than not, public health professionals are the ones dealing with the patients and aftermath of the violence. David Skorton says for USA Today, doctors, nurses, medical researchers, and other health professionals must express our unique perspective from the front lines of this crisis regardless of politics. This is very important because it supports the idea that gun violence is a public health problem and should be taken as such. Everyone in the US knows about gun violence and the toll that it's taking on our country, but I don't think everyone knows exactly how big of an issue it really is. When doing more research on gun violence, I looked at the statistics from Giffords Law Center to educate myself and others about the numbers behind the issue. Giffords Law Center says that every year, 36,000 Americans are killed by gun violence, which is equivalent to 100 deaths every single day. This is crazy to me to think that this many people die just from gun violence alone. There are many different ways that gun violence happens, whether it's mass shootings, homicide, suicide, etc. This leads back to the problem of gun violence in public health. Gun violence is everywhere in today's society, making it more than just a political issue. I believe that out of all the gun violence statistics that I looked over, the scariest one to me is that from 2014 to 2017, gun violence has increased by 16%. This trend proves that if there is no solution to gun violence, this rate will keep increasing over the next few years. I cannot imagine what that would do for our country if gun violence continues to get worse. When looking at the issue of gun violence, it's important to understand that the best way to find a solution is to find the source. This is difficult because there are so many causes for gun violence, but I believe that they can easily be identified and hopefully treated. Many people blame mental illness for most of gun-related tragedies. Although I think that some of the time this is true, I do not believe that mental illness is the major cause for what drives gun violence to happen. With that being said, mental health is something that can be treated most of the time by public health professionals. James Gilligan says that the best way to prevent gun violence is to recognize signs from individuals and intervene when it's appropriate. He goes on to talk about how if we want to find the cause for gun violence, we have to use public health approaches to understand red flags and warning signs of violence. As well as all of this, the main and most obvious cause of gun violence is having access to firearms. When guns get into the hands of people who should not have access to them, then only bad things can happen. Although gun violence sometimes seems like it will never end and there are no solutions to agree on, I believe that there is still hope for our country and we can find solutions to end this nationwide dilemma. Every time there's a mass shooting or homicide of any sort, the first thing that people do is turn to politics. I think that in today's society, people use gun violence to express their political views to make a change. Even though I do believe we need more strict gun laws, I do not think this will happen anytime soon. This leads us to using public health approaches to find different solutions for ending gun violence. I think a good start to this is to change our social norms to establish a non-violent gun safety culture. We can do this by limiting gun access to people who have warning signs of violence or mental issues. We can also change how we display firearms to our youth as well. We should restrict how many young individuals have access to guns. Another simple way that we can continue with a gun safety culture is to hold firearm dealers accountable. We should monitor who is selling guns and the authority they have to give away these dangerous firearms. It's our job as a country to ensure that if people are still going to be able to purchase firearms, that it's happening in a safe way. This means that we need responsible gun salesmen who are going to run background checks and pay attention to any sort of red flags or warning signs from anyone who's trying to purchase a weapon. The Prevention Institute says that the best thing that public health can do to prevent gun violence from happening is to recognize gun violence as a critical and preventable public health problem. Public health plays a bigger role in the prevention of gun violence than many people realize, and the sooner that we can act on this, the sooner we can have a solution. Another good point brought up by the Prevention Institute is that we should take it to our own communities to become gun safe and stick to it. If we can start small in local communities, this will be the best way to eventually start a culture of gun safety that will become recognized as a norm for future generations. Ways to start a safe community would be to start teaching the youth about violence prevention and mold it into their brains that violence is unacceptable and make sure it's known how dangerous guns really are. We can also start more local intervention centers and encourage people to attend these centers if they're showing any signs of violence. I believe that if we act on these actions, then the amount of gun-related violence will go down exponentially. I think to test this, we should record the number of gun violence incidents leading up to the start of these programs, as well as the annual gun-related deaths. From there, we can see if the numbers start to decrease once the plan is in action. This would be a good way to monitor if the public health approach towards gun violence is making a difference. If it is, then we could take it a step further, promoting these styles to get bigger and bigger to become nationwide ideals. In conclusion, I strongly believe that gun control is the biggest issue that our country is currently facing. Hundreds of Americans are dying every single day because of guns alone. This is such a big problem because the culture we currently have allows gun-related incidents to happen over and over again with nothing being done about it. I stand on the idea that instead of turning to politics to solve this problem, we should look towards public health for solutions. So many gun safety influencers agree that we are a long way from gun laws being changed, and because of this, public health approaches are the most effective way to find solutions to the violence. I think that by holding gun dealers accountable to safe purchases, paying attention to warning and promoting gun safety in our communities and cultures, that we can start a pathway to ending gun violence altogether. Gun violence is a huge problem for our country, and the way that we're going to end it is through public health and using public health approaches to find the source. Thank you.